Angela Rayner's gone, but Bridget Phillipson is still in the cabinet. What does it all mean?
Hello and welcome back to At the Chalk Face. So, reshuffle. I tell you what, I shouldn't say this, but sometimes I lose track or lose the will with politics because it's getting increasingly polarized, not just in this country, around the world, but always gets my excitement when some poor minister or secretary loses their job and then level reshuffle happens. And of course, we've just had one, haven't we, Dave? It's a big shake-up.
Well, I'm not sure if I would describe Angela Rayner as poor for a start. I think the house in Hove was like £800,000 or something.
Pay your taxes. Yes. No, true. But obviously, yes, we've had the housing secretary resign recently, and that's led to a reshuffle. And of course, whenever there's a reshuffle, that teachers think, oh, can we have an education minister longer than 2 minutes? Or maybe teachers thinking, oh, this is a chance for the education minister to go. I guess depending how you feel about the current education minister at the time. But you did allude to Bridget Phillipson. She's kept her job as education secretary, but it's not quite as simple as that, is it? Because people see the headline figure. Okay, so their education secretaries kept their job, but they can't do everything on their own, can they? There's all these sort of lower level ministers, and quite a few of those were replaced in the reshuffle. I mean, there's been a big shake-up, even though the education secretary has remained.
Yeah, absolutely, Craig. That's right. You've got the education secretary that heads it all up, obviously, but underneath them, there's a series of junior ministers that kind of get on with the work, and then obviously a layer below them as well. And yeah, we've lost a couple of significant figures this week, just below Bridget Phillipson. So although she's unaffected, her actual ministerial team has changed quite a bit. I've actually made some notes for this episode, Craig, because there's so much to sort of talk about and get right. We don't really want to get it all wrong, right? So Catherine McKinnell she was the Minister for School Standards. She stepped down. Janet Davey, who served as the Children's Minister, she's gone. Stephen Morgan, formerly the Minister of Early Education, has been reassigned as a government whip. So 3 significant figures out of the Department for Education, which opens the door for 3 new entries. So Georgia Gould, Josh McAllister, Olivia Bailey, they are all in, although their precise jobs haven't been decided yet. So there is some change at the Department for Education.
Cool, blimey. And the thing is it always strikes me as it's a really interesting one, politics, isn't it? With those roles, because any other job where you have the body of experience and knowledge, you have, if you're going to, and it's like an SLT, if you want to resign or you want to leave, you have to give a notice period, and typically that's extended. If you're SLT or a deputy head, it's longer, and there's transition and then recruitment. Politics are so much more brutal. I mean, you can be called in. I remember when you obviously had big, massive reshuffles, it's all in the news. You watch the ministers walking into Downing Street to meet the Prime Minister, not knowing, and they quite possibly, then they come out and you've gone. And what does that mean for the, I've always wondered, I don't get too sidetracked, what does that mean for the actual department? In the morning, the boss was there, this initiative, that initiative, and then they don't walk back in. And you go, well, whose is it now? Guess we'll find out in a few minutes. And they just walk in, having been, I don't know, secretary for agriculture and industry or transport, and now you're suddenly in education. It's a completely different domain. And I'm not here to bash all politicians. I really am not. That's not what we're doing on this channel. And I wouldn't want to do a job like that. I really wouldn't. But surely, I see a lot of these, but I think, when was the last time you were in this sphere? Yet you're now in charge of a significant portion. It's bizarre for me at the very top how it actually works. And then you walk in, you pick up all the initiatives of the previous person? Do you spend the first few weeks saying, I need to get up to speed? My gut is no. My gut's probably, I'm here, I'm going to make my mark, and we're going to do things differently. So where's the continuity? Now, maybe I'm just being too harsh, but I don't know. And I think maybe that's why a lot of us just sit here sometimes and go, oh, what's going on? Now, maybe that's unfair, but it's bewildering, I'll be honest, Dave.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's a bit of both, right? They have to continue the work that's already underway to a large, and then they'll want to make their mark and prove that they're doing a good job, and a change for the better and accelerating initiatives as well. So it's a bit of a balance. The thing I find really intriguing is when you're a Secretary of State, you've got this sort of motor caddy that comes along with you, right? So they pull up to number 10, don't they, in these like armored cars, and somebody steps out, opens the door for them, and all this is happening. The moment you're sat, you get nothing. And as I was watching Angela Rayner leave 10 Downing Street, literally, she got out, put her brolly up, and walked down the road. It's like it's literally all or nothing. They're like football managers, aren't they? Craig, hit day and gone tomorrow. If you don't get the results, or you slip up and you bring the club into disrepute one way or the other, you're gone.
If we just called our staff in just like that out the blue and then said, off you go immediately right now, we'd be up against some kind of tribunal, I swear. I'm sure there's procedures we have to follow. However, I'm being a bit unfair earlier, didn't I? Because I said, obviously, oh, they pick up and, how do you measure them? They just pick up new things, they change it. There is supposedly something we can measure these people on, even if it's at an entire party level. Because, of course, we elect these parties based on their manifestos, which, let's face it, are meant to be relatively concrete commitments and promises as to what we will do and what we intend to achieve, all costed if you're going to vote for us. So we do presumably, even though we've had this shuffle and we've got new junior ministers out and in, and we do have something we should be able to hold Labour to as a whole, and the education department too, and that's Labour's manifesto promises relating to education. But I'm going to be really honest with you now, Dave. And this is my entire sphere, education. I can't even tell you right now, if I don't quickly Google it or ask ChatGTP, what the major Labour manifesto promises were for education. Beyond scrapping VAT, I remember that one. That was all over the place. Scrap VAT for private schools. Or the VAT exemption, sorry. I can't remember, can you? That sounds awful.
I know, right? Toothbrushing, I seem to remember, was a bit of a thing.
Brilliant. Scrap VAT for private schools. Sorry,
yeah.
exemption, toothbrushes. Yeah.
Toothbrushing, although I kind of thought that was more of a health issue, but maybe it's education. I don't know. Then, of course, there was a massive hoo-ha because of Ofsted. And we're not going to go there, right? Out of respect for the head teacher who lost their life. We're not going there. But suffice to say that it's triggered a massive change at Ofsted, and so they wanted to scrap the single judgments, and they wanted to bring in the report card. So I remember that is certainly one of the big things that was on the agenda. But you're right. Just scratching my head thinking, I mean, life moves on so quickly and politics moves on so quickly, and our memories fade very quickly. But trying to think back to what were the key messages really beyond VAT for private schools, which was about the economy and trying to level up the state sector, toothbrushing, Ofsted, breakfast clubs. Breakfast clubs, I remember them.
A couple. But you've raised an interesting point back there. I don't even think you did. I mean, I appreciate, yes, we're not going to sort of go into that. But what you highlighted there is out of tragedy, tragedy unfortunately forces things into the news headlines, and then of course governments have to be responsive to that because it's the thing that's talked about. What you've kind of highlighted there is one of the reasons education people are forgetting about it, because they are not the in things in the news, and the government is always trying to respond to the current hot topic because it's what everyone's talking about, it's what's in the news. And whether it's right or wrong, and all these things need to be tackled for different reasons and different priorities, no one is talking about education anymore. A tragedy comes out and then Ofsted becomes a thing, and obviously they respond to it. But generally, you're right, education reform, and it's, unless you're in the teaching sector, it's not talked about, because everyone in the country is talking about cost of living, they're talking about immigration, they're talking about the NHS. These are the things. You go back several, well, years, a couple of decades now, and education was far up there. I remember one prime minister, I want to say it was Tony Blair. What was it? My promise to you is education, education, education. Have I got the right prime minister? I think it
Yeah.
was him. Yeah, and that was it. It's all about that. It starts here. Everything else will flow if we tackle that right. Then it's a big time. It's just not talked about beyond the odd thing which manages to creep through the noise, as obviously did the need to reform Ofsted out of that tragedy. That crept through the noise. And that's a big problem, because I don't think people realise, yes, the NHS is in an awful state at the moment, not through the fault of doctors and nurses, but funding overcrowding. The economy is flying away, obviously, with everything that's going on, the war in Ukraine, cost of living, petrol prices going up. But to break through that noise is
Mm.
hard. And so education, I think, to the general public has got forgotten about, and they don't realise what a crisis situation we're in.
I'll tell you something that did break through, and you're right. And it was fortunate that there wasn't, another incident really, and that was RAC. Do you remember RAC, Craig? That was massive in the news. I want to say 2, 3 years ago. Huge, and that's completely disappeared. I mean, what? Just remind our viewers what RAC was all about.
Okay, I did actually write this one down because I knew you were going to ask this. Reinforced autoclave aerated concrete. Exciting acronym. It was this issue that it was discovered in schools, and then of course when it all came up, and then the problems. This is like sort of Grenfell Tower again, like the building problems. Like, we're going to tackle that. All this cladding needs to be removed, and they committed. And of course, it was big at the time. We've got to deal with it. Do you want to have a guess? I bet you've got the stat there. Do you want to have a guess, out of the 232 schools where they deemed this has to be dealt with immediately, we're going to tackle this, how many is actually being removed from?
Um,
Out of
yeah,
200.
well, it's probably out of triple digits. It's probably double digits. But I just
Low
want to
double
take a step
digits.
back a moment and
Go on.
say, of course, this is another example of where our politics is too much about the short term. So RAC really was, it was a building material that built schools out of, but they knew that it was only going to last 30 years. It's not like, I mean, you said, it was discovered that. In a sense, it kind of wasn't discovered, because when schools were built with RAC, they knew it would only last 30 years. But at the time, they were thinking, well, of course, the school buildings are going to get, renewed and upgraded and everything within 30 years. So it's not a problem. It was probably, mean, I don't know, I'm no structural engineer, but I suspect it was a cheaper building material than alternatives. And so, let's get it in there now, build schools, fix the problem. And it's so short term that now we're sort of, I don't know, 40, 50 years later. I don't actually know the timescale, if I'm honest. Having said I've done the research and prepared for this episode, I clearly haven't. But the point I'm making is that, the intention was that it would be replaced, and it wasn't replaced, and it was forgotten about. And then all of a sudden, a ceiling collapses.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. I got the stats here. So out of the 232 schools where they identified this as a problem, and at the time they say it was a big news, we're going to sort this out, 30. So that means what, roughly 90% of effective schools will still not have this solved. Potential for their ceilings to cave in on our wonderful young people and teachers at any moment. I mean, I'm laughing. It's not a joke, really, but as you say, it's an example of how these things become hot topics, get addressed, and then is that still going on? What's the progress? How does the general public know and measure that? Where's
Yeah.
the trust? Has it just been forgotten? I'm sure it hasn't. It must be on someone's portfolio somewhere, presumably, but the stats don't make it sound like it's being dealt with as much of a high priority. So you sort of leads to questions, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's exactly the same as the cladding issue, as you said, right? Massive news. It's kind of fallen out the news. And now the housing, everyone's talking about, new houses, building new houses, hitting the target for new houses. And Yeah, but what about the housing that is already not fit for purpose? And it's not just cladding, of course; it's all sorts of accommodation. And we've got a massive issue going on now about accommodating migrants and things. So the news moves on, and yeah, as you say, education kind of slips into the background there. I mean, it's probably worth saying no child is currently at risk because of RAC, because those school buildings have been, fenced off and temporary classrooms put in and other arrangements and whatnot. So no one's at risk, but it's short-term politics, right? And we just don't seem to have the money in this country to get things right. But what have they been successful with? It's very easy for us to sit here and poo-poo the government, and we will try and remain sort of neutral. We're just going to sort of cast our opinion on whatever the government of the day is, without bringing sort of personal politics into it too strongly. But let's hold them to account, Craig. What have they achieved? Let's have a look.
Right. Okay. Now this is a list because this required some looking at. So, right. Let's. I feel like Please no copyright infringement. I feel like BBC Verify now. What have the government done? So, what have they done? Partly met, ongoing, and not met. Okay. Let's start with the good news, shall we? Right. They did. They did the end the VAT exemption for private schools. Right. Um,
I wasn't going to bring politics into this, and I'm not going to. But if you're currently working in a private school, you're probably grinding your teeth at this point, thinking,
well,
I don't think ending VAT in private schools is a good thing, but they've achieved it, right?
whether it's good or not, they've said they were going to do it and they did it. But well, yeah, it also doesn't mean all that money is being ring fenced for education either. In fact, it's not. So we've got all those extra money. Oh, brilliant. Where's it going to go? Well, wherever we like. Okay, so they've done that one. Rise teams for school improvements. They've achieved that. 65 established, and they focus on attendance, maths, English, reception. So they've done that. Scrapping single word Ofsted grades, which of course we alluded to earlier, and replacing them with report cards. So all that works up, and that's launching not very long actually, later this year.
November.
I'm sure you'd love to say something about that, Dave. Go on.
Well, only to say that Ofsted definitely needed some reform. I mean, I've got to be careful not to get in my soapbox here, but if you consider, right, that something like the water regulator, completely toothless, right? The water companies are polluting our rivers, big hoo-ha. We know it's not right, profits before infrastructure, and they were toothless. Compare that to education. Ofsted, oh my goodness, do they have some teeth? But they are shark's teeth, right? And it needed reform. The way it was, which was just not right. I mean, they do need to hold schools accountable for standards. All young people deserve the best education, of course, but there's ways and means. The way you go about it, just not collaborative or supportive of the school system at all. Now, Sir Martin Oliver, Her Majesty's Chief Inspector, is really chuffed with his work on the report card system that is coming in. But a lot of the critics just say it's tinkering around the edges, right? Okay, you replace a single word Ofsted grade with a report card that highlights, the strengths and weaknesses in the school. And now that is an improvement. If you were, for example, requires improvement or inadequate or whatever, at least you're going to be shown what you are good at to the public and to the parents, and that's a good thing. But they need to do much more in terms of actually working with schools rather than against schools. That's my view.
Yeah, I agree. I don't get in the whole Ofsted debate, but you're right. While schools are primarily judged against performance improvements and grades, that is everything that will drive a school. And bringing up young people to be decent citizens in this world is a lot more than just progress on improvements in academic grades. There's an awful lot more there that makes a young person. Yes. Anyway, all right, let's go through other things they have done. Updated the early careers framework. So that's done. Now early careers teaching entitlement, ensuring new teachers have or are working towards QTS. I think that comes into effect from next year. Reinstating the school support staff negotiating body. It's not done, but they have launched a consultation. They said they're going to do admissions reform. So schools being required to cooperate with the local authorities on admission and SEND. I think that's a good one. Oh, the toothbrushing scheme. You mentioned that. You know what? I didn't actually remember that one, Dave. The toothbrushing scheme for 3 to 5-year-olds. That obviously never hit my grey matter. But I've got a note here that that's funded and underway. So fantastic. Early language interventions, that's been piloted and being extended out. Work experience guarantees, that's just guidance updated, but that's been released from this academic year. Unique child identifier for data sharing, so that's been included in the schools bill. And post-16 education strategy, this is we're going to work on. So there's a white paper in progress. So there's there's a number of things there, they said they were going to do and are done or are substantially underway. How about you take the next category then, Dave? How about the things that are partially met? So they're not done, they're ongoing. Must try harder. They're getting there.
Always the teacher is Craig. Always is the teacher. Yeah, and so yeah. I mean, before we have a look at what they've partly met, things have been achieved, right? They have. They genuinely have, and it's just not in the public eye, right? Everyone thinks that the Labour government have been sat on their hands for a year, not really doing much, and moaning about the inheritance they got from the Conservative government. But that's only partly true. They have actually achieved quite a bit along the way. It just doesn't make the headlines. Okay, the partly met list then. So, recruiting 6,500 new teachers, especially in shortage subjects. This was a big pledge. I'd forgotten about that one. Yeah, not really met. They haven't really decided how they're going to measure themselves in the interim between now and the next election. So, we don't really know where we are, but estimates say approximately 2,000, 2,300 new teachers. But, what about those, going out the door on the other end? I don't know. Free breakfast clubs for every primary school. So it's been trialled in 750 schools, but how they're going to then roll that out is unclear. Obviously, there's a big budget commitment there. Opening of 3,334 new nurseries. Well, they've done 200 of them.
Okay. So just 3,134 left to go.
Absolutely. Protecting PE time and supporting grassroots sport. They've got a framework in development, but no rollout. Addressing misogyny and teaching healthy relationships in schools. Well, that's all part of the curriculum review, so we would expect to see that come under the reform of the national curriculum, and that's due to be the review is due to be published this term, and then we wait and see what the government actually do with it after that. Annual safeguarding and attendance reviews. So Ofsted are exploring the feasibility of that, but not yet implemented. Oh, and the other one is inspections of mats. I don't know if you remember this one, Craig, but there was a little bit of talk about it in the run up to the election. So at the moment, schools are inspected as individual schools, but many of them belong to a bigger entity, a multi-academy trust. And they talked about inspecting the entire trust as a whole and not just the individual schools. So
I don't want to get too
inspecting the
sidetracked
cake
here.
and not just the sponge.
Yeah, I don't get too sidetracked here, but I was amazed because mats are not a new thing. I mean, obviously, there's many more of them. They're much bigger. They're encompassing more schools. It's hard now to find secondary school that's maybe not in one, but they're hardly new. It was Conservatives who originally brought these in, I think, before the 2 or 3 governments ago. I was amazed that there wasn't talk of this like well over a decade ago. How can you be judging the schools but getting them to be part of this great thing you're calling a MAT that has oversight and strategies and leadership and vision and control and sets plans and objectives for the MATs, but that's not part of the inspectoral framework for the schools? I think it's crazy it's gone that long without MATs being held to account. That seems very unfair to the schools under them. Hang on, I have less autonomy and less control because I'm told what to do, but you're judging me ultimately and not the people above me.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation you make there. And it doesn't seem that difficult to implement to me. Like, if you're going to inspect schools and you've got like a calendar of when the inspections for each school are due, which they have, then just group them together and say, right, all these schools are part of this multi-academy trust. So our next, set that we're going to do is going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, and they all belong to the same mat. And then, you can sort of inspect the mat as a whole through that mechanism as well. But I guess there's, fluidity. Schools leave mats, they join mats, and maybe it's not quite as easy as I make out. But yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
Okay. Creative and vocational subject access to age 16. So again, this is another one that, because there's been such an emphasis on, dare I say, the academic subjects, right? It's been at the expense of what we would call the creative or foundation subjects. So subjects like, DT, art, drama, music, those kinds of subjects, they've really been put to the bottom of the pile in recent years, haven't they, Craig? And it's, it's unfair, right? What do you think?
Well, yes. And again, I could go off on a whole 15 minutes here. If teachers here remember the Michael Gove years, I can't completely bash Michael Gove, and that's not what we're here to do, because he did put computer science on the radar and gave a speech and changed the name of, and great for us. But I think a lot of people, he looked far too much at the academically rote-driven style of education that works fine in countries like China, and pushed that here almost to the extreme, to the detriment of so many of our creative vocational subjects. And of course, what's happening now in the curriculum, indeed the interim curriculum review said we're going to be putting some more effort and some more focus on these creative vocational subjects, because it almost got squashed. If you weren't EBAC, if you weren't English, maths, sciences, the modern foreign languages, geography, history, it just feels like since 2012, it's been forgotten and marginalised. I would not want to be a teacher in all these creative subjects. Haven't got interest. The funding's gone. Equivalencies, say at 16 for GCSEs, so many of them got slashed. It must have been an absolute nightmare. I think that wind is starting to shift, and they're realising we need creative people, and vocational is just as important as academic. But I guess, well, we'll have to look at the outcome of the curriculum review. But I think that was I honestly think that was a real tragedy to that side of our education system. I'll be honest, that's how strongly I feel about it. And I don't come from, well, hang on, I was about to say I don't come from a creative subject. I have computer science teachers up down the contract screaming at me, we are a creative subject, but you know what I mean, Dave.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I mean, we're an EBAC subject, so we can't really put ourselves in that camp. Anyway, ongoing. So stuff that is, maybe no fruits of the labour yet. Pun intended or not, I'm not sure. Anyway, what's ongoing? Tell us what's ongoing.
All right, well, the big one we've hinted a couple of times is the curriculum assessment review. So that's fine. They're sticking to their deadlines. That is a full review of the entire national curriculum from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 5. Interim report out, and we'll do a final one this autumn. So I think the entire education system is waiting on that, because that will be done. But then what will happen with that review that's the real question. So that big one's ongoing. SEND reform, white paper due, I think, this autumn. So sort of $1 billion of funds been allocated to that. Mental health professionals in every school. I think that's a really, really, really good one. I mean, the expansion's underway, but they're saying full coverage not till 2030. Will that be seen through? What will happen? How will it be tracked? Will people forget about it? But that's ongoing. Multi-academy trust inspections, you've mentioned that, Ofsted funded, implementation in progress, so good one. I strongly agree with that. New regional improvement teams, that's an ongoing one. So 200 schools identified, they're claiming a full rollout by March 2026. That's really not that far away, just half a year. School uniform cost reduction. This is one that our parents will be pleased with. Basically, that's about limits on branded items, shoving your school logo and brand on everything. Then you have to buy from this one supplier. They set the price. You have three kids. Yeah, it cost of living. It is a thing. So that's ongoing. PE, this one I didn't know about, Dave. PE teacher training for SEND. So this is part of an Inclusion 2028 program, and that's been launched. And the other one that's ongoing, national music. This is nice because it's feeding back into the returning of the importance to the creative subjects. National Music Education Network, replacing the hubs, and that's meant to be launching one academic year from today, September 26. So a number of other sort of big things going on, which again, I don't really think any of those make the news these days, but lots of stuff still currently ongoing. I want the interesting ones now, Dave. What about the ones that they said they're going to do and they just haven't been met whatsoever so far?
Yeah, a little list of those. Okay, so phonics for maths program, no action taken. Teacher training entitlement CPD, no funding or implementation. Review of bursaries and retention payments, no updates. Excellence in leadership program, no progress that we're aware of that's in the public domain. Improving careers advice in schools, again, everyone keeps talking about it all the time, but no updates or funding as far as I'm aware. So there we go. So what I would say, Craig, in review, is that that is a huge long list of stuff that they've set out to achieve. I wonder, and to be fair, they've done quite a bit of it, and quite a bit of it is still ongoing. So I'm going to give them 6 out of 10 so far. Right, always the teacher. We'll go 6 out of 10. We'll go sort of grade C plus. Anyway, my
You should
point
be using new
is
language, Dave. Is that a 4
oh,
or
new
5? Is it a
language,
safe
new
pass,
language.
a
Okay,
safe pass or a strong pass?
grade 4.
Grade 4. Okay, it's a safe pass at the moment. Go on.
I'll give them a standard pass at the moment, right? But we need to see more in the next 3 years for sure. But my big question is, we said at the beginning that we struggled to remember what the things were, and we've just listed probably more than 20 things that are ongoing one way or the other. Is the message too diluted? If you think about other areas of policy, you would say things like NHS, reduce the waiting lists. Simple, easy to understand. You can measure it. People will feel it if it happens, right? You might say, I can't remember what the actual language was, but something like crush the gangs with immigration. So they didn't say stop the boats, but they said crush the gangs. And again, maybe it's a soundbite, but it's a clear measure, and you can say, well, has it happened or hasn't it happened? And I just think when it comes to like education or growth in the economy, right? Have we got growth in
Yeah.
the economy? Easy to sort of measure one way or the other. You can debate the stats, but you can at least measure it and hold them to account by one stat or another. When it comes to education, what are we actually measuring them by? What's the key thing? What's the key message? What's the main thing that they want to try and achieve so they can say by the end of the parliament, the message was very clear. We were going to do this, and this is what we've done. And I think maybe it's too much dilution. I mean, great if they can do all this stuff, but I would probably have preferred them to just come out with something like, we will reform Ofsted and we will reform the curriculum. Fine.
Yeah.
Everything else can sit underneath those two things. If you want to reform SEND, I'm not saying it shouldn't be reformed. It can come under reforming the curriculum and part of that provision. I just think we're lacking those sound bites. And I don't want politics to be all sound bites, but I think they're important for public perception. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to disagree with you when you started, and you've turned me around a little bit. So I'll kind of finish on that, I guess. The problem is, these departments are also big and also encompassing. But I think the sound bites lose the importance of understanding the nuance of them. You can say reduce waiting list, but the NHS, the entire health system, there's so much. It's enormous. That's why there's all these little tendrils, and you pick up on it. And I think when you reduce to sound bites, you lose the importance of the size of it. But you're right. You convinced me when you turned around and said, but the importance of sometimes those sound bites or the hard hitting things that people relate to for public perception and therefore for awareness. And the phrase perception is everything is so true. So it's a balance, isn't it? I mean, education, what do you improve? Well, there's 101 levers. Well, there's more. There's 101 levers that need pulling and pushing and buttons that need turning and all the rest of it to make it work smoothly. And they probably all need adjusting and changing and tweaking. But that doesn't make for a very interesting headline, does it? So no one's going to remember it. Button 57 turned from 9 to 10. Oh, well done. It's hard. And this is why I wouldn't want to be in politics. But yeah, you're right. I do feel from the general public, we're the forgotten public sector at the moment. I really think that needs to change, but I don't know how we get there.
So I've got two questions then for our viewers as we bring this episode to a close. Two questions for our viewers. So, question one, how would you rate the government's progress in education out of 10, given marks out of 10 so far? And what is the most important part of their manifesto or their pledges for you? What is the critical thing that they should be working on right now in the remaining 3 years of this parliament? So, comments down below, and we'll see you next time at the Chalk Face.